Well, hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our media room. Actually, I had to quickly run to Cypress's school because he left his gym strip, so I am filming here. So we're going to continue on with our devotional, The Storm-Tossed Family by Russell Moore. And he's still finishing off this chapter on marriage and the cross shaping the marriage and our roles. And last week yesterday we talked a little bit about like this ideal of what love is versus our covenantal vows that we make with one another. So let's just pick it up where he left off in this chapter 7. He says, as I look back, I can see the intense joy in our lives that would never have made it into our daydreams about the future. We love those nights eating only cheese sandwiches because that's all we could afford. We loved doing the youth ministry together and figuring out what to do when a teenager showed up on a missions trip with marijuana in tow. We loved sitting up together while I wrote a dissertation, taking breaks to watch reruns of a TV show that we knew so well we could mouth the lines right along with the actors. Truth is, there's no way we could have made that budget work. And there's no way we could have grown up enough to be ready for what Providence had for us. We needed each other. We needed to grow up together and to know that our love for each other doesn't consist in just having it all together. It didn't start that way, and we still had us. We had the passion right at the start, to be sure, but we didn't have intimacy of that kind. That sort of intimacy takes a long, slow merging of lives together, and it requires vulnerability and risk. The scripture says that the ancestral parents were, quote, naked and were not ashamed. Generally, we tend not to give much attention to this, apart from ensuing that, children's pictures in Bibles feature branches or giraffes' necks strategically placed to cover private parts. This reality, though, is essential to what God meant for marriage. In a church I once served, I stood in the foyer after the service talking with a group of elderly couples, one which had just returned from a Caribbean vacation aboard a cruise ship. Expecting to hear of their enjoyment of this time of recreation, someone asked her about the trip, only to see both the women and her husband turn crimson-faced. "Oh, it was awful," the wife said. "We chose this cruise because it was the cheapest we could find. But when we boarded, we discovered as soon as walked out to the pool that it was a topless cruise." This staid and evangelical couple were not expecting the sort of environment where, like a European beach, women walked around as shirtless as the men. "A topless cruise," the wife repeated. "Can you imagine?" An awkward silence ensued for a few minutes before an even more elderly woman, a faithful pillar of the church, said, "Well, that sounds wonderful. I've always wanted to go on a topless cruise." We all looked at one another wide-eyed until she said, "I think it would be so pretty at night to see the stars like that." Exhaling, we realized that this sweet old saint thought topless referred to the lack of a ceiling covering the upper decks of the boat. Well, no one volunteered to explain to our aged sister what topless meant. Most of us decided that she could just safely go to her grave naive about that. And if not, none of us wished to be the one to enlighten her. So no doubt would have wondered how any decent Christian would even know about such things. I suppose I would have to grant her that point. See, not everyone would be offended by a display of partial nudity like this, obviously, or they wouldn't, for one thing, be able to fill cruises like that one. But there's a reason why such displays attract people, and a reason why there must be warnings to keep away minors and those who would be offended. Even among those who don't see nudity as a matter of morality, can see it as a matter of vulnerability. Everyone has some sense of the sort of embarrassment or feeling of shame that can come with nakedness. Those who deem or dream that they could look down at school or at work and realize that they forgot to dress, usually to do so at the time of great personal vulnerability or scrutiny or insecurity. The sense of nakedness is at once a kind of intimacy when rightly contextualized, but a kind of exposure when not. Many of these points of awkwardness would come between the sexes, between those whose bodies display their differences from one another. This goes, though, far beyond the merely physical. The nakedness and shame of the primal humanity was about their grasping to be, in the serpent's words, as gods. Genesis 3:5. And yet, as the philosopher Leon Cass rightly observes, the sight of their own naked bodies shows them otherwise. In looking, as it were, for the first time upon our bodies as sexual beings, we discover how far we are from anything divine, Cass writes. More concretely, we discover first our own permanent incompleteness and the lack of wholeness, both within and without. We need for and are dependent upon a complementary yet different other, even to realize or satisfy our bodily nature. We learn that sex means that we are halves, not wholes, and worse, that we do not command the missing complementary half. Marriage is intended to merge two complementary realities into a union just as real as the unity of the organs of the body itself. In one sense, this is, of course, about sexual union, to which we will turn most likely into the next chapter, but about much more than that too. After all, your sexual organs and your XX and XY chromosomes are not the only things complementary about you. Everyone comes into a marriage with certain points of strength and vulnerability. Part of what it means to actively love each other is to know what these are and to work to shore them up. Intimacy means that you love these realities, and that as you grow to love the other spouse, the more you grow even to love these dynamics without even taking the other's strengths for granted or to resenting him or her for not having other strengths. Often, the quote other woman or quote the other man in a marriage is not a real person with a spouse as having an affair, but instead it's an imagined, idealized husband or wife to which the spouse is constantly compared. Our marriage would be miserable if my wife expected me to be some sort of husband who is repairing items or pouring himself into the yard work or taking care of tasks or such as patching the roof or killing moles in the backyard. She is instead married to someone who can preach sermons and write books. And that's about it. I can map out the kings of Israel and Judah for you if you want, but I genuinely would not know how to boil an egg. I can go on television and debate the cause of global poverty, should you ask, but I couldn't, with a court order, tell you where to keep the light bulbs. By contrast, I know people in the sorts of public ministry positions that I hold with spouses who are just as public-facing, constantly weighing in on the ministry's mission, raising funds, and what have you. And my wife would rather endure an invasive medical procedure than give a speech or participate on a panel at some conference. This turns out to be a great blessing for me. Unlike some people in the world in which I operate, I can actually leave my work behind. There are many people with ambitions for me and for my ministry, and sometimes this can lead to all sorts of pressures from people who all know what I should be doing, well, at least in their minds. Maria is not one of those people. I could genuinely come home today and tell her that I've had decided to return to our hometown to work in anonymity on a shrimp boat for the rest of our lives, and she would be game. That's not because she's disengaged, but just the opposite. She does not love my ministry platform or my brand. She just loves me. She knew and loved me before anyone outside my zip code had ever heard my name. And in relationship to her, nothing has changed at all. And if I long to be a part of some sort of power couple, I don't. I might have the temptation to conform her into that sort of person. If she expected me to live a more, quote, normal life, she might resent the amount of time I have given to study or to travel. Intimacy means we know who the other actually is, for good and for ill, and we do our best to compensate with the strength where the other is weak. Intimacy means further, like knowing what brings joy and what brings pain to the other. Again, back to the head and body analogy. One can only love his own flesh if one knows where one has been hurt. Arm wrestling with a friend at a kitchen table might be perfectly appropriate for you, but not if you have a broken arm and a cast. Eating seafood is a very good thing, but can be deadly for someone who has a shellfish allergy. There's a great deal of ridicule toward so-called trigger warnings in colleges and universities. Warnings, given about certain ideas or concepts in a piece of literature or film or music or speech. To a large degree, this ridicule is warranted, as many students are, quote, triggered by ideas which they disagree, or so rather they engage these ideas with arguments, prefer to shut them out. The idea of trigger warnings, though, started with a legitimate concern for those who had experienced genuine trauma. If one is recuperating from a recent stabbing murder of a parent, one probably wouldn't want to watch a crime procedural on knife-bearing serial killer that same week. A typical viewer, though, might watch the program without any hesitation. The same is true in marriage. There are certain actions or words we should never use with each other, regardless of one's context. You're turning into your mother might be a compliment for someone born in a stable with a star overhead, but for many people, it's not meant or received that way. Intimacy means that we are not just marrying one another, but marrying also one another's memories and experiences. If you grew up in a family that loves to debate with raised voices, this sort of banter might seem like familial bonding to you. Your spouse, who perhaps grew up in a home where raised voices meant discord or hatred, might find it anything but that. Let's just stop there. It was interesting. I remember my friend was doing some pastoral counseling with a couple, and the husband was feeling attacked a lot during conflicts that he was having with his wife, and after talking to the husband, he's like what is it about the conflict? Like what are the rules of engagement? And he's like, well, she goes kind of like ghetto on me, like she starts calling me out and calling me names, and it's like it's all out like a brawl, and I don't feel safe. I just feel like it gets so volatile. So my friend starts to just investigate a bit, starts talking to the wife, going, is this happening? And she's like, well, yeah, I guess. And she starts to share about how she grew up And that was commonplace in her family, where like whenever there was any kind of fight going on in the house, it was a full on out brawl. Not so much physically, but it was, verbal, and they're like people were calling people out and, trash talking people, and it was just normal. That's what she grew up with. And so when Russell Moore talks about like when you marry one another, you're also marrying that person's memories and experiences, and that their nurture and their nature, their family of origin. So when my friend's sitting down with this couple, he's like, okay, so we need to reestablish some new, as we leave, cleave, and weave, we're weaving in some new rules of engagement. And so he got to share with the wife going, when you do this, it's so normal and natural for you. But for this guy, for your husband, he didn't grow up in that culture, that ethos, that flow, that environment. And so for him, he feels full on like blitzkrieg. It's an attack. It's like, boom. And she just had like this moment going, oh my gosh, like I didn't intend to bring this into my marriage, but it's so much a part of my fire and like who I am. Now, it doesn't mean that she completely had to like change her behavior, but it was a light bulb moment, a watershed moment, a turning point for her going, oh, yeah, I think we need to reestablish something new. And in that moment, love and intimacy just gets deeper and deeper. I remember, I think it was Oprah. Oprah said once, like, when you love more, when you know more, you have the greater capacity to love more. And I loved that, these Oprah-isms. When you know more, you have the greater capacity, if you choose. It is a choice. Love is a choice. So if you know more, there's a greater capacity to love more. So for her, when she knew what was happening, why he was feeling like kind of pushed into a corner and like in defense mode, is because that's all she knew was that's how you engage an argument at her house when she was growing up, is you just go all out. And for her husband, it was different. It was a little bit more calmer, more collected, more contemplative, more reserved. They thought about what they needed to say, and then they made like a response, and that was his nature and nurture. But in that moment, there was a deepening in their marriage like never before. And I think that's the call for us in church. And when we're with each other, when we love one another, like when you know more of a person in the church. That's why I keep on telling people, it's like, online church is great to an extent, but it doesn't give me a chance to really get to know you or for you to be known to us. Because when we know you and we get to know your quirks and your queries and your character, it gives us the greater capacity to love and care for you more. And vice versa. As I need you, hopefully you need me, and you get to know me and all my quirks and queries and ADD and all that kind of weird stuff. And you go, that's my pastor. Like, I wouldn't want to trade him for anything else, because like all that in a bag of chips, like he is one big hot mess and whatever, but that's my pastor. And I know him, and he loves his church, and he loves Jesus. It takes time. It takes time to develop those experiences, those new memories, those new leaving, cleaving, and weaving moments. But we're coming up to 21 years of marriage ourselves. We celebrate June 19, 1999. So excited. And we're still learning more about each other. But that's what it is. It's a journey. It's not a destination. Anyways, God bless you guys. Have a great Wednesday. We love you. We're praying for you. We're knowing you. And we'll see you Sunday. We're all back normal, level 1. Everyone can sit anywhere you want. We're going to have cafe open. We're going to have drinks. It's going to be awesome. So come on down. We have children's ministry. We got youth ministry. We got great worship. yeah, it's going to be awesome. So we'll hope to see you come down on Sunday. And yeah, anyways, we need you. We love you. God bless you. Have a great day.